radios that you're going to be buying or using with your license. Okay? This is what it's about. Okay, it says when electromagnetic energy leaves your antenna, it travels through space, and we have radio waves. So for instance, if I had a light bulb, I turned it on, the light goes in all different directions. Well, when I turn this on, generally speaking, the energy kind of goes in different directions. Okay, that's good. But that doesn't, there's more to it than that. Okay? So when radio waves leave the antenna, they can go in many directions depending on the type of antenna, okay? Or the direction that the antenna is pointing, if it's a directional antenna, fine. When that happens to the energy, what happens to the energy is then a function of the frequency. What happens to the energy that once it leaves here is a function of the frequency that this radio is transmitting, okay? And this is called propagation, okay? So types of propagation. One's called line of sight, one's called ground wave, and one's called sky wave. So we're going to take a look at each one, and this will give you lots of answers. So line of sight. Line of sight is when radio waves simply move from point to point in a straight line, okay? That's right here. The VHF and UHF frequencies are primarily propagating in a straight line, so they're known as line of sight frequencies. Now, I don't mean line of sight, meaning I can't see the other side of the building. I can go through the building, but I mean like the other side of Palos Verdes, like the San Francisco Valley. Once there's a little bit too much land in the way, these radios don't handle it, okay? So, like in these two things here you get someone maybe in Hermosa Beach talking to someone down in Redondo, but the person over here on the south side of Palos Verdes, at Terranea, they can't hear you because the hill is in the way. So this is the problem with this kind of propagation. It's good for line of sight, but it's not good for over the hills. That's why we had to use the repeater, right? So, it says VHF and UHF signals, that's these guys here, also bounce off of metal buildings and hills. Okay, fine. So, there's no questions here, but it's important that you understand that. That's the limitation of these frequencies that you're going to have a license for. Okay, more about line of sight. In line of sight propagation, you're limited to the curvature of the Earth. That's right. If I go out there on the beach, and you're 200 feet down the beach, that's fine. But if you're out on a boat, sooner or later, the boat's going on the curvature of the Earth, then I will lose you because the Earth is curving, okay? It says, but line of sight waves can travel about 1/3 farther along the curvature of the Earth than visual line of sight. Don't memorize that because there's no questions about it, okay? And this question here says that the Earth seems less curved to radio waves than to light, and that's why these signals travel further than light. Let me give you the example of both of these here. Let's say that I was standing on the south side of Palos Verdes on the beach, and you were on Avalon on the beach at Catalina. And we each had a flashlight. Well, there's enough curvature, just enough curvature, that neither one of us would see the other person's flashlight. But there's enough curvature that this radio wave would just make it. Okay, that's all they're talking about here. Don't worry about it. Let's see. In line of sight communications, objects around us can cause bad communications. What does that mean? If I'm, let me just keep going. It says, if your signal is reported strong, then weak or distorted, try moving. This can be because objects around you are causing multipass. So let me give you an example of that. I'm at the bottom of Palos Verdes. I'm that person right there. Okay. Well, when I transmit, my signal goes right in all directions straight. But I also have the signal going off the back of my antenna that bounces off Palos Verdes. Well, some of those bouncings may bounce and come back to your radio. That means your radio heard me when I first transmitted, and a microsecond later heard the signal that bounced off the hill. That's called multi-pathing. In other words, the signal can go in different paths and bounce off of something and get back to you. Okay? And that's not good. That's multi-pathing. So if your signal is reported strong and then weak or distorted, try moving. So the person who's near the PV should just try moving a little, so maybe the multipathing doesn't work. That's all we're saying. So multipathing is when your signal bounces off of objects and reaches the other radio via different lengths, causing irregular fading or signal fading. Okay. So much for multipathing. Here's the second kind of propagation. Okay, it's called ground wave. The ground wave is when radios move along the surface of the Earth. Okay. There's no breaks. An example could be an AM broadcast station. So if you're listening to 1070 on the AM dial, KNX, where's their transmitter? Hawthorne Boulevard and 100th Street, right behind the car garage. Big antennas sitting out there in the field. Big vertical antennas. So if you turn on K and X right here, fine. And if you drive up to the 405, up to Mulholland Drive, going into the valley, you can still hear them. Oh, if you drive into the San Fernando Valley, you still hear them. You drive out to Six Flags Magic Mountain, you can still hear them. Oh my goodness, we've now gone in over 2 different mountains. And eventually they get weak and the signal goes away. Now this, how far would this go? It wouldn't go very far at all, okay? So this is called ground wave. So there's certain frequencies that this happens, okay? That's good, okay? There's no breaks in the reception, but the signal does get weaker as you go out. And some of the amateur radio frequencies that we have licenses for, this is the propagation. And so when I'm on some of these frequencies, I could be talking to someone in Las Vegas, and it's traveling along the ground. The radio waves traveling along the ground. And here's the big one. This is the one that most people got their licenses for. This is called, the skywave propagation, okay? So above the Earth, there are layers of what's called the ionosphere. And there's 3 layers, the D, the E, and the F, okay? And there's the D, there's the E, and I got 2 layers of F here. There's 3 layers technically at night. Once the sun hits the F layer splits into 2, and there's an F1 and an F2. The F2 is higher, okay. So, when some signals come off of my antenna, if they're these kind of signals, the ones that are just kind of going up, they'll just get, certain signals off of here, not the material, get absorbed here. Other signals, as you're going to see, are going to go up here and bounce back. That's what we're going to talk about here. But here's skywave. Skywave is when radio waves bounce off of the layers, then return to the Earth. Okay? They can actually bounce off several times. This one could bounce off here and bounce back up and bounce back. Okay, so I put some frequencies in here of some amateur bands that are popular. So this is the 14 megahertz band, that's the 20 meter band. 21 megahertz, that's the 15 meter band. 28, 29 megahertz, that's the 10 meter band. What does that mean? That means if I want to talk to somebody, over in Texas or the East Coast, I can use one of these bands and the energy will go up here, bounce off the atmosphere, the ionosphere, bounce back down. If I want to talk to somebody in England, more than likely it's going to go up to, I'll pick one of these frequencies, it's going to go up, it's going to bounce down, it's going to bounce back to the ionosphere and bounce back down again. So that's what lets us talk around the world, because it bounces up the ionosphere and back. So this became the reason why lots and lots of people way back before you were ever born would get an amateur radio license, because there was no such thing as internet, and you never called somebody halfway around the world. But you could buy this radio and get on there and talk to people halfway around the world. This is the novelty right here. And this is still the part of the hobby that I like. So the 10 meter band, that's this one here, tends to bounce off the F2 layer. You notice as the frequencies get higher, they bounce off the different layers. But the F2 layer is only there at night. Why? Because the sun hits the and splits into F1 and F2. So the best long distance 10 meter propagation will be during daylight hours, period. Now watch this. Here's California. Let's say that's Boston. Well, when is my signal going to be the strongest over there? When it's noon right here. And the sun is hitting this the strongest. So this is halfway over. You see? What if I want to talk to somebody in Hawaii? Oh, well, when it's more daylight towards Hawaii, then my signal gets stronger over there. So anyway, don't remember that. But it's during daylight hours when the F2 gives me the best signal. It says, what if I go to higher frequencies? Right? Let's go back. This was the 10 meter band. What if I go to a higher frequency? I mean, this one went up here and bounced, this one up here and bounced, this one went up here and bounced, and actually came back to what if I go to a higher frequency? Well, if I go to slightly higher frequencies, like say 40 to 140 megahertz, they can hit that F2 layer, but they'll bounce off at an angle. Never comes back. So we have a amateur band right here called the 50 megahertz band. That's the 6 meter band. So if you tried to do this kind of thing on the 6 meter band, it never bounces back. It just bounces off at an angle. But you notice they said up to a certain point it bounces at an angle. Okay, watch this now. a little later. We'll get to this other part a little later. It says occasionally these signals, typically the band I just talked about, can be heard at much further distances. Well, I just told you that they couldn't be heard. This is typically because there's some sporadic bouncing off the E layer. Let me go back and show you the picture. I should have had a picture here. Let me do this. It turns out that the amateur band 50 megahertz, once in a while, when it's going to do this and bounce off, some of the energy does some bouncing around and comes back down. So all of a sudden someone here will hear somebody on that band and say, wait a minute, I'm not supposed to hear you. It's a propagation. You just want to memorize the answer. It's called sporadic peaks. This is typically the energy sporadically bouncing off the E layer. I think it's called sporadic. Just memorize that answer. Don't worry about it. Here's the other one you want to memorize. The sporadic E is most commonly associated with over-the-horizon signals on this band, this band, this band. I disagree, but that's my issue. You just memorize their answer. Okay? It's not worth getting into all the details. Okay, well, now let's go to some higher frequencies. Let's say higher than 140. What happens then? Oh, those signals go right through. So if you want to talk to a space station, or you want to talk to a satellite, or something out in space, you use the higher frequencies, like the frequencies that these would be on, or even higher. And these go right through. So when they're talking to the satellite or the space station, or the astronauts, they're using the higher frequencies. So if a UHF station, which means greater than 300 megahertz, is not using a repeater and is outside of the local area, you will not hear it because it will probably be on line of sight. What is that on? Oh, geez. Let's say there's a repeater. This is confusing. Let's say there's a repeater here, and we're using it in Palos Verdes. But if it's a high frequency like the 440 megahertz band, any of the energy that's going up just goes straight through. It ain't going to bounce back. That's all they're saying. So a UHF station, greater than it, is not using a repeater and is outside your area, you will not hear it. So if you and I are talking on one of these things, we actually have energy that's going up into space. But it doesn't bounce off of anything, so no one 200, 300 miles away is going to hear our signal bounce back. That's all that's saying, okay? So just kind of memorize that answer. It is not that to memorize here, but a quick summary. Here's all the amateur band, well, here's most all the amateur bands from 2 megahertz all the way down to this. These are just different bands. You notice that the lower frequency ones are the ground wave bands. The ones right in here are called the skywave bands. Those are the ones that bounce off of the skywave and give us long distance. But the ones you're going to get licensed for are basically called the line of sight, because they just go line of sight primarily for repeaters. Don't memorize any of that, it's just a general information. Okay, this question that they snuck in kind of disagrees with some things we've already talked about. As I noted earlier, line of sight propagation is basically straight and limited by the curvature of the Earth. Okay, fine. But every time you have a rule, there's an exception. However, there are times when signals can be partially refracted around objects with a sharp edge, and this is called knife edge propagation. And it happens on the line of sight thing. So if we had a sharp edge something, whatever that means, a building with a sharp edge, or some object that is like a small little hill with a sharp edge, apparently some of that energy will go around that sharp edge. So, okay, I'd never heard of that until I put the question in here. Okay, here's a crazy one. This is called tropospheric ducting. Let's say that you live on a place called Palos Verdes. Now this happens basically at around 1,000 feet above sea level. So here's a hill, here's some water, here's another hill, but it's on the farther away, okay? And when we have an inversion layer, okay, we frequently have what's called inversion layers. If my little transmitter is up inside this little duct in here, the energy will just keep bouncing around, and if I'm over here, I can actually hear it. So sometimes UHF and VHF communications will occur around 300 miles over the horizon due to tropospheric scattering. You're seeing here. So we got cool, dry air here, right? It's an inversion layer. We got cool, dry air here, and we got moist air right inside.